There are moments when life quietly prepares two souls in different places, shaping them through loneliness, lessons, healing, and personal growth, until they are finally capable of walking the same path. The waiting has never been meaningless. Every delay has been changing both of you in ways neither of you could see. Today, you will discover 5 hidden psychological truths that reveal why your soulmate may finally be ready to return, why the emotional distance is ending, and how the journey home begins long before anyone knocks on your door. Stay until the end, because the 5th truth explains the unmistakable sign that the separation has truly fulfilled its purpose. Many people believe that distance is proof something has gone wrong, but the deeper patterns of human psychology often reveal something entirely different. Separation is not always the collapse of a meaningful connection. Sometimes it is the quiet space where two individuals are shaped into the people they must become before they can truly meet. When emotions are intense, people often cling to one another in ways that hide their fears rather than heal them. Physical closeness can create the illusion of completeness, while leaving emotional wounds untouched. It is only when life creates distance that those hidden parts begin to reveal themselves. Loneliness exposes insecurities that companionship once concealed. Silence forces reflection that constant conversation once distracted from. The absence of another person becomes a mirror, showing each individual the unfinished work within themselves. Growth rarely feels comfortable. It often begins with confusion, disappointment, and the painful question of why someone had to leave. Yet these difficult emotions serve an important purpose. They challenge old beliefs, unhealthy habits, unrealistic expectations, and emotional dependencies. Instead of relying on another person to provide security, individuals gradually learn to build that security from within. Confidence becomes quieter but stronger. Patience replaces desperation. Self-respect grows where fear once lived. These changes cannot be forced overnight. They require time, experience, and countless moments of honest self-examination. It is also possible that your soulmate has been walking through a similar transformation without you knowing it. While you have been questioning the distance, they may have been confronting their own fears, healing old emotional scars, learning difficult lessons, or discovering parts of themselves they had ignored for years. Life rarely transforms two people on the same schedule, but it often prepares them for the same destination. What appears to be two separate journeys may actually be one story unfolding from different directions. This explains why reunion cannot be rushed. Trying to force a connection before both people have grown often recreates the same misunderstandings that caused separation in the first place. Timing is not simply about calendars or circumstances. It reflects emotional readiness. When fear begins to lose its control, when resentment no longer dominates the heart, and when both individuals become capable of giving love freely instead of seeking constant reassurance, the relationship stands on entirely different ground. The distance that once felt unbearable slowly reveals itself as an invisible classroom, teaching lessons that could never have been learned together. The greatest transformations usually happen without applause. No one sees the quiet nights of reflection, the private battles against doubt, or the moments when someone chooses healing instead of bitterness. Yet these unseen victories become the foundation of every lasting relationship. What once felt like abandonment begins to look more like preparation, not because the pain was pleasant, but because it shaped two hearts into stronger, wiser, and more compassionate versions of themselves, capable of recognizing each other with greater clarity than ever before. There comes a moment in every person's inner journey when happiness is no longer something they chase through other people. Instead, it begins to grow quietly from within. This kind of happiness is different from excitement or temporary pleasure. It is calm, steady, and deeply rooted in self-acceptance. When someone reaches this state, their decisions begin to change. They no longer act from fear of rejection, pride, or the need to prove themselves. They start listening to the quieter voice beneath their emotions, the one that consistently guides them toward what truly matters. This inner shift often changes the direction of the heart in ways that even the person cannot fully explain. Many people spend years carrying emotional weight that silently influences every relationship. Old disappointments create walls. Past betrayals make trust feel dangerous. Childhood experiences leave hidden fears of abandonment or unworthiness. These invisible burdens affect every choice, even when people believe they have moved on. But genuine happiness has a remarkable effect. It does not erase painful memories, yet it changes the meaning attached to them. Instead of living as prisoners of yesterday, people begin seeing those experiences as teachers rather than permanent wounds. The heart becomes lighter because it is no longer carrying the impossible task of rewriting the past. As emotional peace grows, something equally important begins to disappear. The need to control every outcome slowly fades away. A person who has found inner balance no longer feels compelled to manipulate situations, play emotional games, or hide behind pride. They become more honest with themselves about who they miss, who they value, and where they truly belong. What once felt impossible to admit suddenly becomes simple. The walls built for protection no longer seem necessary when fear has lost its power. This transformation often surprises those watching from the outside. They may see someone smiling more easily, making thoughtful decisions, or showing unexpected kindness. What they cannot see is the profound psychological change taking place beneath the surface. The mind has stopped fighting itself. The heart has stopped resisting what it already knows. Instead of searching endlessly for something new to fill an emotional emptiness, the individual begins appreciating the people whose presence has always carried genuine meaning. This is why someone who has finally found inner happiness may suddenly feel drawn back toward a treatise that once seemed impossible to restore. The journey is no longer driven by loneliness or desperation. It is inspired by clarity. They are not returning because they need someone to complete them. They are returning because they have become whole enough to recognize the value of a bond that was never based on dependency. Their choices come from freedom rather than fear. When happiness becomes the foundation instead of the destination, the heart naturally moves toward authenticity. Masks become exhausting. Pretending loses its purpose. Emotional distance begins to feel unnecessary because honesty is no longer threatening. In that state, reaching out, reconnecting, and choosing love become acts of quiet courage rather than emotional risk. The path back no longer feels like surrender. It feels like returning to a truth that has been patiently waiting beneath every fear, every silence, and every mile of separation. Some connections leave a lasting impression that refuses to disappear, regardless of how much time passes or how many miles separate two people. While everyday relationships may slowly fade from memory, a deeply meaningful bond often continues to exist beneath the surface of conscious thought. It does not demand constant attention, yet it quietly influences emotions, decisions, and moments of reflection. This is because certain relationships become woven into the way we understand ourselves. They are no longer just memories of another person. They become part of our own inner world. The human mind has an extraordinary ability to preserve emotionally significant experiences. A familiar song, a particular place, or even the scent of rain can suddenly awaken feelings that seemed long forgotten. These moments are not simply random acts of memory. They reveal how deeply emotional experiences are stored within us. When someone has touched your life in a profound way, the connection often continues through subtle reminders that appear without warning. They arrive quietly, inviting reflection instead of demanding attention. Even after long periods of silence, these memories can feel surprisingly vivid, as though they have been patiently waiting beneath the surface. This invisible bond also influences personal growth. People often discover that lessons learned from an important relationship continue shaping their character long after the relationship itself has changed. They become more compassionate because they remember being understood. They become more patient because they have experienced misunderstanding. They become stronger because they survived separation. In this way, the influence of another person extends far beyond shared conversations, physical presence. The connection becomes a quiet force, encouraging maturity, wisdom, and emotional depth. There are also times when someone unexpectedly enters your thoughts without any obvious presence. You may wonder why a certain face suddenly appears in your mind after months or even years of true silence. While it is impossible to know exactly what another person is thinking at that same moment, these experiences remind us that meaningful relationships rarely disappear completely from the landscape of memory. The heart often revisits what has carried genuine significance, especially during moments of personal change or emotional clarity. As individuals heal and become more honest with themselves, they frequently begin seeing old relationships from an entirely different perspective. Past misunderstandings no longer seem as overwhelming. Small conflicts lose their emotional intensity. The mind stops replaying painful arguments and starts recognizing moments of kindness, support, and shared understanding that were once overlooked. Emotional maturity changes not only who we become, but also how we interpret our own history. Because of this inner transformation, a meaningful connection can begin drawing two lives, closer, again, without dramatic gestures or desperate pursuit. There is no need for constant pressure when mutual understanding begins replacing fear. The invisible bond that quietly survived the distance now rests upon stronger emotional foundations than before. Instead of being held together by longing alone, it is strengthened by growth, self-awareness, and a deeper appreciation for what the relationship truly represented. What once seemed like an ending gradually reveals itself as a chapter that continued unfolding in silence, preparing both hearts to recognize the enduring value of a connection that never completely disappeared. Long before two people stand face to face again, something begins to change within them. The first signs of reunion are rarely visible in the outside world. They appear quietly in thoughts, emotions, and daily choices. This inner shift often goes unnoticed because it does not arrive with dramatic announcements or sudden certainty. Instead, it unfolds gradually, like the first light before sunrise. A person who once felt trapped by doubt begins to experience an unexpected sense of calm. Questions that once demanded immediate answers lose their urgency. The heart becomes less restless, and the future no longer feels like something to fear. One of the most significant changes is the release of emotional resistance. During periods of separation, people often replay painful memories, searching for someone to blame or for a perfect explanation. The mind circles around the same disappointments until they become exhausting. Over time, however, constant reflection begins to create understanding instead of confusion. Individuals start recognizing that every relationship contains moments of misunderstanding, human weakness, and imperfect decisions. This realization softens the heart. Forgiveness becomes possible, not because the past is forgotten, but because carrying resentment no longer feels worth the emotional burden. As this transformation continues, confidence begins to replace uncertainty. People stop measuring their worth by whether another person calls, writes, or returns. They become more focused on living with purpose, improving themselves, and appreciating the present. Ironically, this is often the moment when emotional distance starts losing its power. When someone no longer acts from desperation, they naturally become more open, more genuine, and more emotionally available. They are no longer chasing an outcome. They are simply becoming the healthiest version of themselves. Many people also notice subtle changes in the way they experience everyday life. Certain memories return without bringing pain. Places that once felt heavy begin to feel peaceful again. Small moments inspire gratitude instead of sadness. These changes do not necessarily predict future events, but they reveal something important about the inner world. Healing has begun replacing emotional conflict. The mind is creating space for hope, instead of constantly defending itself against disappointment. At the same time, life's circumstances often begin shifting in unexpected ways. New opportunities appear. Conversations happen naturally. Obstacles that once seemed impossible slowly lose their influence. While these events may seem unrelated, they often reflect the simple reality that people who have grown emotionally make different decisions than they once did. A healthier mindset creates healthier actions, and healthier actions frequently open doors that fear once kept closed. Perhaps the most powerful change is the quiet certainty that develops without needing constant proof. Instead of forcing every answer, the heart becomes comfortable allowing life to unfold at its own pace. Patience no longer feels like helpless waiting. It becomes an expression of trust in one's own growth. This inner peace creates the strongest foundation for any lasting reunion, because it is built upon emotional maturity rather than urgency. By the time two paths finally cross again, the most important distance has already disappeared. It was never measured in miles but in fear, misunderstanding, and unresolved emotions. Once those barriers begin to dissolve, the journey toward each other has already begun, even before either person takes the first visible step. Many people spend years believing that home is a destination marked on a map, a familiar house, or a place filled with treasured memories. Yet the deepest sense of home is rarely created by walls or cities. It is created by the emotional experience of being fully accepted without pretending to be someone else. When two people have grown through hardship, faced their fears, and learned to understand themselves, they begin searching for something very different from excitement or perfection. They begin searching for peace. That quiet feeling of safety becomes more valuable than constant passion, because it allows love to breathe instead of struggle. A truly meaningful connection does not demand that either person abandon their individuality. Instead, it creates a space where both people feel free to express their thoughts, emotions, strengths, and imperfections without fear of being rejected. This emotional safety is one of the rarest experiences in human relationships. It cannot be manufactured through grand promises or dramatic gestures. It develops slowly through honesty, consistency, and mutual respect. Over time, trust becomes stronger than uncertainty, and understanding becomes more important than winning arguments. The relationship changes from something that must constantly be protected into something that naturally supports both lives. This transformation also changes the way people define love itself. In earlier stages of life, love is often confused with intensity, constant excitement, or the fear of losing someone. Every disagreement feels threatening, and every silence feels dangerous. As emotional maturity grows, these beliefs begin to fade. Love becomes less about possession and more about presence. It is no longer measured by how tightly someone holds on, but by how willingly they stand beside another person through both joyful and difficult seasons. The desire to control gives way to the desire to understand. When two people return to one another after genuine personal growth, they often discover that they are meeting each other for the first time in a completely different way. They may carry the same names and memories, but their hearts have changed. They listen more carefully. They react with greater patience. They appreciate small moments that once seemed ordinary. The distance that once caused pain has taught them the value of simple conversations, shared laughter, quiet evenings, and the comfort of knowing someone truly sees them. What was once taken for granted now feels deeply meaningful. Perhaps the greatest sign that a relationship has become a true home is the absence of constant, emotional struggle. There is no need to wear masks, compete for affection, or prove personal worth. Each person feels encouraged to become their best self, while knowing they are already accepted as they are. This creates a quiet confidence that strengthens the bond over time. Challenges may still appear, but they are faced together instead of allowing them to create separation. In the end, the longest journey is never across countries or continents. It is the journey from fear to trust, from emotional isolation to genuine connection, and from searching endlessly outside ourselves to recognizing the rare person whose presence brings calm to our restless hearts. When that realization finally arrives, home is no longer a place waiting somewhere in the distance. It is the peace found in the presence of someone who has chosen